How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Music Production Podcast. My name is Brian Funk. I'm your host. This is the show where we get to talk about everything related to making music. It's one of those places where you can kind of nerd out and share your love for the craft, anything to do with making music. And today I think I have a good guest for that. It's Dani DiCiaccio, who makes music as KYOSi. You're from New York, right? You're always in the area.
Upstate New York, yeah.
Upstate New York? Okay, nice. A little bit away from the crazy city. So I'm like in the other direction on Long Island, away from the crazy city.
Got it.
Cool.
I mean, I live in the city, but originally I grew up in Rochester.
Mm-hmm. Nice. So yeah, Dani's making some really cool electronic experimental music. It's kind of got a little pop in there, I'd say, with the vocals. But if you're into making and producing your own music, it's definitely very interesting on the production side too. So very happy to have you here, Dani. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks so much for having me. It's nice to talk with you too.
Yeah, so we've definitely hit some of the similar stomping grounds in the past. It looks like you've been to the Warper Party a bunch, as have I. Very cool venue. I guess it's
I love it.
Yeah, like very cool atmosphere there for just electronic artists. If you're in the New York area anywhere, it's really worth going to a Warper Party event. And it's Julie, who runs it, is very cool about getting people on to play. Visual artists too.
Yeah, it's like one of the best places to get weird, try new stuff.
Yeah.
And just see how your music is received.
Yeah, it's a cool environment too, because one of the things about like playing out on the local scene sometimes is like a lot of people are there, they might just be at the bar or whatever, but the Warper Party is different in that people are there to hear new things and kind of get their imaginations played around with a little bit. It's a good crowd.
Yep, it definitely has that experimental vibe, which I love.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice to have, because sometimes you try to do weird things and people are like, what the hell are you doing? Play Bon Jovi.
Oh, no, I have never gotten that, thank God.
I have.
Wow.
Yeah, my favorite request, maybe. That and Sublime are like usually the popular requests.
Oh, yikes.
So you're doing some cool stuff. You just released the track, Negative Space, which is really fun. Really lots of cool stuff going on there.
Thank you.
Maybe I can ask you to tell us a little bit about how you describe yourself, your work, and what you do.
Sure. So I approach music as a singer, first and foremost. That's my training is in voice, and my whole sensibility is built around singing. And so I think that's what kind of gives my music a pop edge to it, is that there's sort of verse chorus style framework where there's like, some empty sparse verses and then often like a larger chorus. So that's kind of where the pop, I think, comes in. But otherwise, I really try to, for the most part, especially on this EP, try to abandon form a little bit as much as possible, and keep things just feeling good. So I think that's one of the reasons Negative Space is so like out there from my normal stuff, which is more traditionally pop. But yeah, I produce, I work in Ableton, I collaborate with a lot of folks, and in particular on this EP, it was between myself and a jazz pianist named Todd Brosman. We wrote everything, produced it all together, and really like the collaboration between myself and a jazz pianist is like, I think, what makes the sound what it is. It's fun to collaborate with somebody who works so off the grid. Whereas I am very much a click track person. I always have that on. I quantize pretty heavily, and his stuff it breaks that whole system down.
Yeah, it's nice to have like kind of like the yin to your yang, someone that fills in the other side.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay, that's cool. I can kind of, listening to it, I kind of get I almost like in the structure a little bit of that track too. A jazz freedom going on.
Totally.
How does the collaboration process work with you guys? Are you in the same room? Is it over distance?
No, it's both. I mean, he lives in Harlem and I live in Queens, so it feels like it's long distance.
It can be, right?
But it really can be. So it's a combination of things. We go back and forth through like Dropbox, and then we get together like every couple weeks just to jam and see what happens. And it's really organic. He's a good buddy, been good friends for a long time, and sort of started out just like noodling around and seeing what happened, and then just developed into like a full-fledged collab.
Nice. So that it wasn't like a forced thing. It was just kind of evolved.
No. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's cool too. Like that you're both able to progress a little bit when it's hard to get together. I mean, from being in bands and stuff, that's always one of the main challenges is just finding the time to physically get together, which you really need to do as a band.
Yep, it's so true. But even when we can't get together, like there's work to be done. Like I can polish up a bass line, or vice versa. So we were able to keep it moving pretty consistently.
Nice. And were you guys working on just that one track, or is it kind of more the history?
No, we worked on all three of the tracks that are part of Negative Space. So the title track itself, we worked on Boo Radley, and All I've Had. And just, I mean, there were other tracks too along the way that didn't sort of make the cut, but those three just felt like they worked well together as a collection. Right. We'll see. We might still continue to like polish up some of those other ones, and see what happens. But that's the first thing we've put out together.
Yeah, I could see that. They definitely fit together nicely. Something I've been really interested in myself lately is actually like negative space in music and minimalism. Where like, when you sit down at the computer, you're the producer, you got this super powerful machine, you can add forever, you can keep putting things in there, and just because you can doesn't mean you should. And more and more, I find that as you put more stuff in, it takes away from the impact of the things that are already there. And I think your track Negative Space is a good example of using that kind of like space, let it breathe a little bit. Right.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons we called it that. One is the subject matter, and two is the vibe. Like I wanted to make it awkward at points. Like, are they going to keep going? Are they going to, is this it? I really wanted to play with that both sonically and lyrically.
And I guess then you've sort of, in that way, got sort of like a double play on Negative Space.
Right.
Is there any kind of way you go about, I would think of it as discipline, really, like disciplining yourself to not just go crazy. And especially, I guess, with like a jazz pianist who's probably able to play quite a lot, him as well, to hold back where necessary, know when to let loose.
Right. I think it is a little bit of discipline. I mean, there's points where we sort of stepped on each other's toes. We deleted each other's work. We overproduced it. And then we were like, let's step back. Let's take this out. And sort of in that sense, like, I think it's, as far as collaboration goes, that's why it's so nice to work with somebody who doesn't have a huge ego.
Yeah.
Like you can say whatever the best idea for the song is ends up winning out. And that's what I feel like happened here. But I think one technique is just knowing that you have other stuff. If it doesn't fit here, it will fit somewhere else. So you don't have to cram it all into one track.
Yeah. Okay. So you mean like in another song?
Yeah. Another song, a live set. Like,
right.
And this isn't the only song. Like, that's another cool thing is there's no rules when it comes to releasing music. Like, if in 6 months I decide to work this track into like a house or techno like remix, that's like my own remix of my own track. Nobody's gonna care, but it's totally fine to do that. So
Yeah.
just because it's out right now doesn't mean it's the end all be all.
Yeah, that's like a fun new thing about the way music gets put out these days, right? You have
Right.
that option. I mean, I think Kanye
Yep.
West was like revising his record well after he released it.
Right. Oh
You
my
know?
gosh, that's right. I don't even remember which one that was.
Yeah, I think it was the last one he did. But the idea, like, you can, I don't know if that's a good or bad thing sometimes, because sometimes it's nice to just commit and stay and move forward.
Yeah.
But the idea that,
True.
like, if you want to take some of the stuff you worked on and try something later, that's a cool way to think about it.
Yeah, and there's always a live show. Like my
Hmm.
stuff is always different from studio to live. So there's my point is there's always an opportunity to just mess with it and try new things out later on.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think having that egoless partner is a big help.
Yeah, and it makes you like me like try to be the same, to like
Hmm.
let it go. It's a good
Yeah.
model to have.
Those are always the best collaborations I've been involved in, are the ones where the other person is like that, I'm like that. And sometimes, depending on where I am, I've noticed I have more or less of an ego. Usually it has to do with
Right.
how secure I feel with the person I'm playing with.
Yes, 100%.
But to realize, like, like, you are not your part. It's not you. It's a part. It's just something you played, and I think that's an important thing to keep in mind with any collaboration, is to let go of ownership of, I did this, I did that. That's my part. You can't change that for you.
Right. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. It's what's best for the song, and
Hmm.
like I wouldn't play with somebody if I didn't respect the way they went about things anyway. So no matter what he does or anyone that I'm working with does, I want to hear it out and like give
Yeah.
it a fair shot because I trust them.
Right. Yeah, that's a great attitude, and the best collaborations I've had were like that, for sure. And
Yeah.
the ones that weren't like that really never got off the ground anyway.
Exactly. You can tell pretty quickly usually, I think.
Hmm. That's cool. So, how you mentioned, like, you'll change it up a lot for live performance. So how are you approaching that when you perform live? What's that look like?
So it varies really depending on the place,
Hmm.
the time. Um, it's been a while since I've played out, to be honest. It's been such a hectic, busy year that I haven't been able to play out much, but it depends. So like if I'm playing a club, I will sometimes I speed things up a little bit.
Hmm.
Not a ton, but like a little bit. Or if it's more of a sort of like relaxed concert hall, like Rockwood, for example, I'll keep things the same tempo. Um, and then I export everything. I keep things in arrangement view. And then I just sort of rework the arrangement a little bit. So
Hmm.
maybe I'll add like some strings or other parts or make the breakdown section longer. And then once I've got it rearranged, I just export it and then put it back into session view and then just get it ready. Like get my vocals set up, um, get everything kind of triggered and all my follow actions set up. Yeah.
Nice. So you're able to then, like, kind of play around with the order of things, I imagine, if you're in session view, right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't too much,
Hmm.
because I've got so much other stuff going on. I sort of pre-plan what I'm gonna be doing. There's not when I get to that point, if anything, it's like planned improv. Um,
Okay.
so I'll say like here's like I'll cut out 16, 24 bars or something somewhere that I'm gonna kind of like improvise like a synth line or improvise with the like my looper that I use with my voice, one of those
Hmm.
things. But I always know where the end is, so it's not total. Um, so I don't go down the rabbit hole entirely.
Right. What kind of looper do you use for the vocals?
I use the Boss 505.
Hmm.
Or
Nice.
is it I never remember if it's 505 or SOS. Let me go look, actually.
That's the red one, though, right?
It's the red one,
Yeah.
505, RC, Boss
Uh-huh.
RC 505 loop station.
Yeah. Yeah, the loop station. Those are cool.
Mm-hmm.
They
I love it.
yeah, I mean, they've been around for a while now, and people are still, it's one of those technologies, I guess, that just works. So people are pretty happy with
It,
them.
yeah, it works so well. Like, it's very tactile, which I like. Um, it's the learning curve is very, how do they say it, brief or
Hmm.
short. So yeah, I love it.
Are you syncing
And
that
I got
to your laptop, to your computer?
sometimes, yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes I do, but often I would say I'm going to contradict what I did just say, which is that there's not a lot of improvisation. But sometimes one way I love to use that instrument is improvisationally, where I'll sort of like cue up three three effects in the beginning, three at the end, load up a ton of vocals as I'm going,
Mm.
as I'm singing, and then kind of see what happens, and just like chop vocals up in or out of sync for those like 24 bars that I've reserved in Ableton. Does that
Right.
make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have like some freedom there with
Yep.
I guess that's almost like in a way like session. You're kind of putting a bunch of things on your palette inside the loop station, and then
Right. Yeah. And just like getting ready to see what happens.
that sounds fun. It's like two separate like collections of I always think of them like paints, like it's a palette and like you're
Yes.
drawing from it. That sounds
Yep.
fun.
I agree.
Before we hit record, we were kind of joking around about checking your email on stage.
Oh yeah.
That it's like the danger of the live performance where it could very well look like you're just behind a laptop checking your email. And
Yeah.
and I go through like different phases where sometimes I feel like, nah, you're doing enough, man. Like it's good. And then other times I feel like I have to do too much. And when I listen back, I can tell I'm just turning knobs and doing
Yep.
things to look like I'm doing something.
Yep.
My question for you is, how do you deal with that, and how do you make it so you feel comfortable enough that it doesn't look like you're doing your emails?
Practice.
Yeah.
That is really like the beginning and end of the answer. I think for me is doing it a lot, watching myself do it, like watching a video of me performing.
Hmm.
I mean, that's really like, no one was ever going to tell me, Danny, it looks like you're checking your email on stage. That was, they're too kind, like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
something I had to see for myself. And I wouldn't have seen that if I didn't watch videos of myself performing.
Yeah.
So I make myself do it. And it hurts. Sometimes it hurts, but it's like, if I don't really go out and find out, I would never know. So that, and then really like prepping for the next one and knowing, in a lot of ways, I know exactly what's going to happen at any given moment.
Hmm.
When I'm performing, I feel like as an unsigned artist that doesn't have, or like a sort of underground artist, even that doesn't have like a giant fan base, but I do have a really dedicated one. I like owe it to them. There's a
Yeah.
million things in New York City that somebody could be doing on any given night, and the fact that somebody comes to see me play is never lost on me.
Hmm.
Like I have a lot of respect for anybody that comes out to see me play, and I just like I want to be ready for that. So I practice a lot.
Yeah, that's a good attitude. Especially like you said, like you're probably like you're winning people over too. I mean, for me, like no one's lining up at the door, right? you know. So
Yeah, or it's rare. It's
yeah,
not. That's not the norm
yeah,
at all.
yeah. It's not like I don't know, a Taylor Swift concert where as soon as she comes
Yeah,
out, everyone's already thrilled that she's there.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay, that's cool. And I agree, it can be a little rough sometimes, but it's part of the process. I guess if you can't really watch yourself perform, then maybe that means there's something we got to work on.
Right. There's your answer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very nice. Everyone's so kind, but sometimes you need to see it for yourself.
Absolutely. And those people that do tell you are invaluable,
Mhm.
like somebody that says like, listen, you are flat. You're doing too much. You need to, if you're going to sing, you got to pay attention on your vocals. When people say that to me, I'm like, you must love me. You
Mhm.
must really love me.
You're not going to let me go out and do that again.
No, that's love. That is love.
Mhm. It can be challenging too, I guess, if you are being very experimental, to
Yep.
find that spot where it's still like enjoyable for the audience too. But I guess that's, like you said, paying attention to like what venue you're playing, who your audience is really important as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
So something cool I saw on your site, I think I saw this on the Facebook site, was the score to The Sisters. It's like as
Yeah.
an English teacher, this one kind of got exciting for me. Can you tell us a little bit
Cool.
about
I'm
that?
glad. Sure. So some friends of friends were doing a show, really starting a company. They called it the Soho Shakespeare Company.
Mm.
And they adapted Macbeth to be a feminist telling of it, a telling of it in which Lady Macbeth uh, knew all along what was going to happen,
Mm.
and sort of worked everything to her to a T, orchestrated the whole event. Um, and so I ended up scoring the trailer for them
Mm.
and one of their performances, um, for like their investors. So like an abridged version of their performance. And when it came time to do their actual performance, they just used the stems that I had given them for their tech manager.
Hmm.
But it was awesome. It was a blast. Like I loved playing with sound in a new way, and it opened up some interesting other doors for me. Um, I'm doing a podcast because people heard that work. I'm doing another sound design project, like a more commercial sound design project with a friend of mine, basically because she, saw that work.
Hmm.
I think people they want to know. It's impressive to folks if you can do more than one thing with sound.
Right.
Um, you know,
Yeah, and the audio for that wasn't like a song. It was very
yeah.
atmospheric, very kind of like moody, more setting the scene, I'd say,
Hmm.
with some
Yeah.
little tie in with the video too.
Yeah. I'm glad you listened to it. Yeah, we were going for like as otherworldly as
Hmm.
possible. We wanted to like give voices to these sort of like Shakespearean spirits and non-human entities that they were trying to evoke. So it was a blast.
Hmm. Yeah, I thought it was a cool take. I've taught Macbeth to 11th graders a bunch of
Okay.
times. And one of the things I always like to point out when you are looking at like a Shakespearean play is we don't know what it really looked like. All we have are the
Hmm.
words. We don't even have
Hmm.
stage direction in there.
Hmm.
So you
Hmm.
don't know like if they're saying something in a whisper or yell. You don't know if they're like right in each other's face or across the room. If they're emphasizing certain words even. And I thought what
Yeah.
was really cool, like the scene that you guys had, was with the Lady Macbeth trying to convince Macbeth to kill the king, and
Right.
that is like a really like powerful scene, and especially I'm interested. I got to check it out if it's available anywhere. But like this like feminist telling too, because she is like she has some lines like "unsex me here,"
Yep. Yep.
take my milk and turn it sour. So like
Yep.
she's taking all those like kind of traditional feminine characteristics of being nurturing, and she's like, the hell with it.
Yeah.
Make me
Yeah. It's
evil.
incredible.
I thought it was really cool that the witches were in that scene, just to like kind of emphasize that like you said, like this kind of other there's that whole layer of the supernatural in that play.
Yeah, I know. I had to read it again because I think the last time I read it was in 11th grade. When I was like only paying attention 20% anyway. So
Oh, that's a lot.
yeah.
I'm not sure I get that from anyone.
So anyway, I had to read it again and like look it all up and it's a totally different way to like use your brain with sound. So I love doing projects like that.
So how did you approach that? Was that did you have the video to work with? And then
Yeah, so exactly. Yep. They shot the video, then they gave it to me. And we, it at the end of the day, it was for them. They were my client.
right.
And so I had to make them happy, but I provided like a ton of options for them.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately I'm glad that they were okay with the one we went with because it was the most fun in my mind. But yeah, I just approached it. I did a lot of like sort of slow scrubbing because I especially wanted like the language, like the witches, the close-ups of the witches to be aligned. Like I wanted it to seem like they were mumbling the gibberish that I put in there.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a lot of like slow-mo scrubbing and warping of sound.
It's a lot of stretching it out to get those textures out of it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's a cool technique. Like when you start, I mean, warping is really cool, right? I mean, you can make things in time and fit nicely and correct it a little, but when you misuse it, it gets really interesting when you start pulling sounds
so
apart.
much more fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You sort of unlock these worlds inside the sound.
Yep. I think really like there's sort of happenstance artifacts of warping were the sounds we ended up leaving in.
Right. And was it a lot of voice that you used for that?
Yep. We used a lot of voice. I recorded my own, tried to make it sound like as witchy and crazy as possible. And yeah, I think I used a couple samples, like the opera at the end is a sample. That's not me.
Very cool. And did you do that inside of Live with the video and everything?
Yep. Just dragged it in. And then we didn't export it out of Live. I just exported the track and then they put it into like, I don't know, Premiere maybe or Final Cut or something like that. But yep, I mean, I'm so comfortable in Live at this point that I don't mind throwing the video in there. It's not the best video engine, but it works.
Yeah, I think it's nice when you sort of have, if the video's done, and then you can just do you doing the sound around it is pretty cool. There are some really interesting tools that have come out that I've not really had a chance to play with yet, but I would love it if if you could just like have the video kind of behave just like the audio clip more so, almost even like in Session View, where you launch a scene and it just launches whatever video you need and kind of move things around that way.
Okay. I think I know what you mean.
Yeah. I use Resolume for some video stuff live, and it's a little bit like Ableton Live, but it would just be nice if it was all inside there, all in one.
Yeah.
Maybe as
someday
computers get more powerful or something.
Right. Yeah. Maybe Ableton's product team will hear this and take note.
So that led you to some other work. You said you're doing a podcast too?
Yeah, I'm recording a podcast, which is like, it's not that that's similar to it, but it's just another non-musical way to play with sound, which is a blast. Yeah. Like they come to the studio and it's a podcast for a group called Camel Assembly, which is an organization that a couple of good friends of mine started about 3.5 years ago now. And it's amazing what they've done with it. Like they've turned this organization for female and female identifying artists and activists and turn it into a real global mission. They've got people in like New York where we started it and Kenya and London and, gosh, I don't even know where else, like Hong Kong.
Wow.
And so the podcast, I think, is like, it's been awesome to record it. Like, once a week they have 2 women come in who are like incredible bosses at whatever they do, and I record it. And it's another muscle that I use, right? So I'm setting up 4 mics and recording 4 sets of vocals, which is something I would never do on my own. And kind of coming up with the intro and the sonic identity of it as we go. So it's a blast.
And do you think that helps your music making much? Are you finding a connection to that with your stuff as KYOSi?
Yeah, why not? I'm not. Listen, I don't know if there's like an exact like correlation to it, but I mean, I think it all helps. It all like the more well-rounded I am at sound, like I guess what it means is maybe like I'm more unafraid now to, if I want to, or if I'm writing a piece that calls for 3 singers, to call 3 singers into the studio and work with them. Okay, like I'm that's just one example, but I think the more you can do and just step outside of the comfort zone, the better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've asked you because like I found that as I do other types of things, the connections are always kind of interesting. How you realize like, oh, that's something I could do in a track. That's something I can bring in, and
right.
And I think it's just a great way to expand your ability as an artist. Is to take on sometimes these oddball things. And, not just stick with the one thing that you do all the time. Kind of like you said before about being versatile, and it's a good thing to show you can do more than just that one thing.
Right. Yep. Totally.
So what do you have coming up next? You said there's some cool stuff in the works here, some upcoming releases.
Yeah. So I guess in the immediate future, on September 19th, the music video for the single off the EP is coming out. That's for Boo Radley.
Cool.
I'm so excited about that. We worked really hard. We came up with like a very clear vision as we were getting ready to work on this video. And I feel like we just totally realized it. So it looks exactly how it looked in my head.
Nice.
Which I think is not, I've not said that before, so I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, that's rare.
Right? So yeah, I'm excited. I can't wait for like people to see it. And it's also, my brother is in it, my brother's an amazing dancer. My friend Sharif Keys, who's a musician as well, and is an amazing dancer, is in it. We worked with an incredible visual effects artist. So it's weird, but it's beautiful. I love it. So that's coming out soon, later this month. I am working on, I think I mentioned this before, but another sound design scoring project, again with Todd. And this is like a more commercial one, though it is like kind of artsy. I can't say too much more about it, but when I'll be very eager to share it once it's out.
And is this a connection from the Sisters score, the Macbeth
adaptation? I think so. Yeah, I showed once I was able to show that work, I think people were like, okay, it's more than just KYOSi singing and pressing buttons,
Yeah, and that's just a great, example of how one thing usually has like a surprise outcome. You never really know where it's going to take you, even if it just ends up in your music. But here you are with this other project.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Like, it's so important to just do shit, keep moving, keep learning, because the landscape is changing so frequently. And if you can't do it, someone else can. And that's not to, I don't say that to like make it competitive sounding, but in a way it's like competition with yourself. You have to always be getting better, or at least that's how I think about it.
Oh, definitely. I think that's a good way to look at it too, kind of like competing with, your yesterday self almost.
Exactly. Yeah.
But this line of work, whatever aspect you get into, is super competitive as far as like just getting in and the positions and the amount of people that
Hmm.
want to do it. That you really do have to be working and trying new things and building new muscles.
Yep.
Hmm.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. So then I guess working on that, I'm getting married soon. So I've got to like,
Congratulations.
thank you. Got to like take some time off to do regular stuff.
Right.
And then I think like I think that'll be it. I'll take the rest of the year off from music stuff.
Hmm.
Like I'll be writing and working on things. And then in 2020, I hope to like definitely play some more shows for sure.
Hmm. Nice. I had the
Yeah.
commercial stuff is very interesting for me lately. I had a great talk with Tommy Z, who has a production company where he does a lot of music for brands, and
Okay.
really, really pretty fascinating. And the podcast episode got a lot of positive feedback. A lot of people asking me about him and what he does and all of
Okay.
that. But just this idea of this other aspect, this other way to kind of make your ends meet as a musician,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which I think is important. And then the nice thing too, I think, is it sort of frees you as an artist a little bit too, in that
Yep.
maybe when I was a teenager, I would have thought of it as selling out a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
I see it much differently now as like it's really opening that door for you to do what you want
Yep.
to do. A-
Yep. Yep.
And I don't hear kids saying selling out anymore. That's not like a thing.
Yeah, I guess you would know.
Yeah,
I mean,
they're like, I mean, it's all about like, well, many of their favorite artists is just like all about making money. And, that's a big, like,
right.
that's a big motif in a lot of popular music these days.
Right.
But yeah, I don't hear that anymore in like the kind of new internet world.
Is that from kids who are interested in the mainstream already? Like, do you have any kids that are more interested in the underground stuff, and would they say selling out?
Yeah.
Is it?
I've had to explain that term a bunch,
Oh, okay. Okay. Wow.
especially with Catcher in the Rye, teaching that book,
Uh
because
huh.
he has a bit about like his older brother who's a writer, and he thinks he's like kind of sold. He calls him a prostitute for going to Hollywood. Holden Caulfield says
Right.
that in
Yep.
his
I
book.
remember. Yep. I love that book.
So like that was always this is even going back a few years now, but to explain like what does he mean by that, you know, and that it took a
Mm-hmm,
little
mm-hmm.
explanation, you know, but I think it's
Right.
I don't know, I'm not sure really. Uh, I think it's maybe just a different way of looking at things. Like I hear like, well, you got to make your money somehow. They're doing what they love,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I've
Yep. It's
like
true.
the the idea of having something else, like if it's the commercial stuff, like it really does. It's a great way for people to even hear about what you do anyway, to get your art out there, even because a lot of
Totally.
the big companies that are paying the money for the music are putting it out there. It's exposure in that way too.
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, hopefully, it's with someone or a group of people that are going to let you execute a vision,
Uh-huh.
or at least work with you on it. I mean, it's no fun if someone's just like, I need it to be exactly this, and to have, you know, at 30 seconds, I need a scream in the key of D. Like, you want, like, you want to be able to have fun with it, is what
Yeah.
I'm saying. So hopefully you can find that happy medium.
Yeah. It's a interesting world that we have, with
Yeah.
all those possibilities. Um, Let me ask you, do you have as for our listeners out there, do you have any advice for them of they're getting started, they're venturing into this, they want to make a name for themselves as an artist? Any lessons
Yeah.
maybe you've learned along the way that you care to share with them?
Um, Gosh. Well, I think kind of piggybacking on what I've been saying this whole time we've been chatting is just like, do whatever comes up, go for it. Like, you know, that's one thing I have done and I'm happy for. Like if there's a project that comes up that's related to sound, I jump on it.
Right.
And I'm now that I'm kind of getting to be a little more experienced, I'm able to do that a little bit less and pick and choose a bit more. But like I've taught beat making in prisons, you know,
Oh, wow.
like because I wanted to be close to it, because I wanted a job that was in sound, you know, and that became a definitive part of my life. And I would say just stay as close to it as possible, because it all leads back to something cool.
That sounds like a pretty cool job doing
Yeah, I don't know
if I want to let you just gloss over that.
Right. I know. Yeah. This was like just after college, and I was living in Ithaca at the time, Ithaca, New York, where I went to school. And I had been running a music studio, a nonprofit music studio that was going well in Ithaca, and they sort of liked what they were hearing. This nonprofit, or sorry, the maximum security juvenile detention center was called McCormick Secure Center, and they had heard good things about our program, and so they wanted to start a version of it inside their detention center. So I was working with like people, young men who are 21 or under, who had been convicted of like sentences that were life no parole. So these were people who had murdered folks, people who had raped people, like armed robberies, etc. So I mean, it was a cool job, I guess, but that almost makes it was deep, you know. Like I was leaving there and like really going through it, and I did it for about a year. And I loved it. It was amazing. You know, I still have the recordings that we made, and every once in a while I listen to them, and I think about those boys often, because they were amazing. They were really talented, smart, interested young men who I chose to sort of not judge while I was in there, and I became really, really fond of. So it was heartbreaking and wonderful at the same time.
Oh, I'm sure that's got to be incredibly like hard emotional work too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I always think about, you know, in the high school, even like you know, there are a lot of kids going through stuff I don't even know how I deal with at my age, and they're you know, they're just kids. And I really try to remember, like, this is just what I believe, but that they're really a product of their environment in a lot of the cases. And to think that I would be any different in their situation is kind of arrogant.
Yep, 100%.
So I actually really like working with some of the kids that are struggling. I used to do the suspension room, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't get it this year, and I was really disappointed.
That's so funny.
But I really liked it just to be like, you know, an adult that will talk to them and not just yell at them and scold them and tell them they got to straighten themselves out, or to just be like a person to them was, for me, really satisfying. And you know, I was able to make, like, you know, relationships with them and be at least someone in that building that was like going to be cool to them. And I've always kind of like hoped, you know, part of the reason I'm so disappointed that I don't do the suspension anymore is I always kind of hoped I could like make it more than what it was, and maybe bring in some music production with them. Because a lot of the kids that are in those situations don't really have anything. Like, they don't really have like a hobby or something that they're like actively trying to get better at that can maybe distract them from some of the things that get them into trouble.
Yep. And that was the goal of the original music production program that I was running in Ithaca. Like that studio concept is not a new one.
Yeah.
You know, people for 10 years or so have been trying to quote unquote get kids off streets by giving them something cool to do.
Yeah.
And I can say, as somebody who did it for years, I'm not sure without a lot of other buy-in that it works. You know, it really like the forces are strong for kids. They have a lot of shit going on. And like, I think you really put the nail on the head when you said that it's arrogant to think you'd be different, because I would say 8 out of 10 kids that I was teaching in this prison, you know, had their crimes were related to gang violence because they didn't have enough to begin with. Right. You know, they weren't, well, listen, I can't say what they were or weren't, but they didn't have enough. A gang approached them to be part of it, to provide for them. And so they went for it, you know, for whatever, for better or for worse. But it came from not having what one needed, whether it's attention or materials or food. It came from like a real place versus a place of evil or just like wanting to be a terrible person.
Yeah, I think like, you know, I'm not dealing with anyone in quite such a severe situation, but yeah, a lot of the pull is incredible. Like the pull for acceptance.
Yes.
Is like, you'll just never really break that. Like it's really, I mean, I can remember, you know, but there was, you know, there was like really nothing, there's not much you can really say that'll like just make them go, oh, okay. You know, maybe it'll ferment in there a little bit, and over time it might, you know, maybe that'll mean something. But yeah, I think like the pull is difficult, and I don't always know, like you said, if just giving someone like a, you know, a copy of GarageBand or something is going to change their life necessarily. But
I'd love to think it would, right? Like I would love that, but it's one tool in the toolbox for them, you know? Yeah. So hopefully it might. And and just because it might, it's still worth doing. Yeah. Even if it doesn't mean that it's not. It's just one more thing for people to use.
Yeah, and I've really developed like a thinking since I've been teaching that, you know, if you even get to one kid a year, you're doing a lot. You know, nothing. I sometimes bring stuff into my classes. I'm like, this is gonna be so cool. If I was in high school, I would have loved this. And then like, no one cares. But then once in a while, a kid will show up and be like, you know, when you did that thing or you said that thing, and it might have even been something that I didn't even think twice about. Just kind of. You just never know, how, and this isn't just for school or kids, I guess, either. You just never know how something you do is going to affect another person. So I think you got to do it, you know?
Yep.
Well, we are getting kind of near the end of our hour here. Let me see. So we've got the video for Boo Radley coming out the 19th of September. Is this, I have to like, you know, English nerd this a little. Is this, are there connections to Kill a Mockingbird with that song?
So, yeah, I think so. I mean, I guess I wrote it like, I guess I'm kind of stumbling here because this is such a big topic, but lately I feel like I don't talk about anything that doesn't lead back to class. And sort of what we were just talking about with the juvenile detention center, the way people approach the world because of their God-given or what they were born into, you know? And I think that the Boo Radley connection isn't super direct, but for me, that song is very much about class, about the way important perceived neighborhoods that are now important are that way because artists, people who didn't have a lot of money, didn't come from anything, chose to dig deep and make those places amazing. And Boo Radley, I just felt like would be such a good uh, personification of the modern everyman. Like this quiet, introspective person that people are very curious about, know very much about. I thought he would be a good positing that conversation with
Right.
him, which is somebody I think a lot of people were curious about. It's a name people remember. Would be a good way to get the message across.
Yeah, that's cool. And he's definitely like a symbol of like misunderstanding and
Yeah,
so like how
exactly.
we tend to like think we have a person figured out on face value without really looking
Right.
into who they really are.
Exactly.
Cool. Yeah, I wanted to ask you that. I had to. So nice. So we can send people to KYOSi Music. I'll spell that. That's
Yep.
KYOSi and then music.com. And you're around on SoundCloud and Instagram and Facebook and the normal places. We'll put links in the show notes to all that stuff.
All of it. Yep.
Yeah. So listen, it was cool talking to you, and really nice to like get a chance to dive into some of your music. And a lot of the music listening I do these days is like kind of selfish, in like that
Okay.
I'm like looking for like inspiration. I'm trying to hear like cool new
Yeah.
sounds, and listening to your stuff really did that for me. So I thank you for that.
Oh, what a nice thing to say. Thank you. Of course.
Yeah,
My
definitely
pleasure.
like gave me like some ideas and encouraged me a little bit to be a little weird and experiment some. So thanks.
Good.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, Dani. It was great talking to you. And
Same.
thank you to everyone who's listening. Make sure you go to KYOSimusic.com and listen to some of these tracks and check out the video for Boo Radley on the 19th of September. All right. Take care, everybody.